Welcome to the full version of a talk given at the meeting of the Council for the Advancement and Support of Education. This was originally delivered at the House of Commons on the 10th of September 2018. Clearly, the issue of mental health and well-being in our schools is very much a hot topic at the present time. However, this short presentation focuses more around staff than it does around the students or pupils. After the MA lecture, Sarah came to ask me about her assignment. An able young woman already ahead of science in a large secondary academy, this was surely going to be about a few technical issues. Within minutes, she was racked by sobs. As these subsided, she shared that she was struggling to cope. Her role was demanding in itself, but on top of that, she and her team were transported every evening to another academy within the group. They were rewriting the pupils' science portfolios for their BTEC science course, in order to avoid what was seen by the leadership as an impending car crash. She was physically exhausted and morally dissipated. Finally, unable to cope, she didn't finish her MA, and even worse, she left teaching, which I view as a significant loss to our profession. This is not an isolated story. However, the plural of anecdote is not data. Consider the NAS UWT teacher survey in 2016. They found that 5% of teachers over a period had increased their use of tobacco, 14% had undergone counselling, over 3/4, 79%, had reported experiencing work-related anxiety. A further 86% had suffered sleeplessness, and a third of respondents had reported poor health. 2% had even self-harmed as a result of work-related pressures. Department for Education's own statistics for 2017 to 18 showed that recruitment targets for secondary education had been missed by 80% in every subject apart from PE. In November 2017, it emerged that the number of people applying for postgraduate teacher training in 2018-19 was down by a staggering 33% since last year. According to UCAS data, by mid-December, 12,820 people had applied to start teacher training in that next academic year, compared with over 19,000 applicants the previous year. So a serious and even crisis situation. And whilst I'd readily admit that it's probably complex, however, workload and coercive accountability hover around the pole position. Ultriker and Kemmenthofer wrote in 2015 that the pressure to do well on inspection experienced by head teachers, this was a large international survey, was greatest in England. In a recent TED Talk covering 17 countries, teachers were asked a few basic questions about their jobs and role. Surprisingly, only the samples from the US and the UK highlighted stress as an issue. I'm only going to explore two areas, though many other factors can be cited. Firstly, I would argue that there is a profound ignorance on the part of school leaders about how we manage and motivate people. Most leaders have little grasp of the design specification of the human being. The fact that there is a wide variability in the population around skills, ability, resilience and so on is still no excuse. At their core, human beings are set up for survival, and under threat they resort to basic fight or flight responses. These are great for responding to immediate and non-deferrable threats. However, they create problems when they're activated by coercive management, challenging classes, and unreasonable workload. Here, there is a reframing of the situation from acute to chronic. This is a very different ballgame, as the individual then tends to suppress their inner scream to sustain their employment and earn a living, and perhaps hang on to their dream to teach. Issues of stress are unlikely to be addressed in the current climate unless they have a commercial currency. Just consider the following statement made by Sir Daniel Moynihan, the CEO of the Harris Federation, who I believe is the highest paid CEO of a multi-academy trust in the country. In a keynote speech delivered on the 25th of May 2017, he said the Harris Federation was about pupil achievement and anything else was just noise and distraction. Negative stress, the so-called distress, is pernicious and represents a greater threat to health than moderate drinking, moderate smoking, and even moderate obesity. A key shortcoming of many school leaders is they do not have a well-crafted understanding of motivation. Back in the 1940s, psychologists such as Deci and Maslow argued that intrinsic motivation was by far and away more powerful than extrinsic motivation. The latter is the domain of the carrot and the stick. Much more recently, Daniel Pink has reinforced this message. In his much vaunted TED Talk, he highlights the preeminence of autonomy, mastery, and purpose as motivators. He cites the research of the LSE academic Dan Ariely, which shows that the simplistic approaches to motivation may work for mechanical tasks, but they actually inhibit the execution of complex tasks, which would certainly include teaching. The second area which has a significant impact on well-being and mental health is the prevailing narrative in our schools. Currently, this is not positive. Simply reading the headlines of the newspapers over the last week would take you inexorably to that conclusion. Mention is made of pupils self-harming, shortfall of school places, head teachers using questionable tactics to remove underperforming pupils. The list goes on. Story has a powerful role to play with our well-being and mental health. Well, our brains create a narrative to explain our lives, and this will include work. But if the subconscious part of our brain perceives threat, it will start to urge action, to change or remove ourselves from the situation. If our conscious mind overrides this and we decide to simply remain in a given situation, the subconscious will then collect more negative information to advance and substantiate its claim. The level of suppression by the conscious mind then has to increase. However, if no action is taken, stress levels and well-being will plunge. In our schools, the narrative has become significantly fractured. So to conclude, there is a need for leaders to actually understand what they are doing to their employees. Well-being and mental health is not like calling green flag or the AA, something to be called out when things go wrong. There is a pressing need for school leaders, and indeed those involved in the wider development of policy, need to recraft the prevailing narrative. It's not suggested that we create a sort of facile pantomime of positivity, but rather that we create organizations where there is a conscious and positive narrative which is not in tension with everyday reality. If you're interested in exploring any of these ideas further, many of them are contained in my recently published book, It's Doing My Head In, and this is published by John Catt Educational. Thank you so much for listening.